Hi everybody, welcome to Grand Travel Plans. Today we'll be talking about Venice, Italy, a magical city where there are no cars and you get around either by boat or by walking. This episode is brought to you by the Wine Acuity app. Learn about wine while playing tasting games with your friends. Available at the Apple Store or Google Play. Our plan was to come into Venice on train, spend a couple of days at a centrally located hotel, and see the major sights of the city, like St. Mark's Square, the Doge's Palace, the Grand Canal, the Rialto Bridge. We also wanted to ride on a gondola and visit the glass-blowing island of Murano. We distinctly did not want to visit the lace-making island of Burano. It just didn't sound as interesting as sitting at canal-side, people-watching, and sipping favorite local drinks. Along the way, we were looking for nice local restaurants and places that felt authentic to Venice. We visited in the middle of October to avoid the worst crowds of summer. We arrived by train to Venezia Santa Lucia train station after we had recovered from a minor planning faux pas, as we had originally booked our trains to Venezia Mestre station, which is not on the island. Thankfully, it was an easy recovery since that's where we were going to have to change trains anyway to cross over to the island. Lesson learned. The city started charming us immediately. When you exited the train station, you're in a large square next to a canal with access to the Vaporetto water bus or the private water taxis. Be aware that you'll be met by an army of porters as you exit the station, who want to carry your bags to the canal for hefty fees. Unless you really have that much baggage, you can easily just wheel your bags to the Vaporetto or taxi yourself. We opted for a water taxi, and it was a spectacular way to get your first look at the city. We stayed at the Hotel Baglioni just outside of St. Mark's Square, which had its own taxi dock. The hotel is rated 5 stars and really was a great base of operations. Since we arrived in the early afternoon, after checking in, we stopped at the hotel's bar for a quick drink and some light snacks. We asked the bartender for a nice local wine, and he recommended a €200 Corvina. When we asked for something a bit more modest for just afternoon sipping wine, he couldn't come up with any suggestions. We just ordered mixed drinks to go with the food. After cleaning up from our travels, we decided to wander around a little bit, popping into St. Mark's Square for a quick look before heading over to the theater area for a nice dinner. We discovered Ristorante Antico Martini to enjoy a nice steak dinner. The waiter convinced us to try the bistecca fiorentina instead of the Chateaubriand we were eyeing. What arrived was a massive T-bone steak that was perfect for sharing. It was both decadent and delicious. Afterwards, we wandered back to our hotel through the now uncrowded streets. The city seems to clear out in the evening, so it feels much more intimate without all the day trippers. After a nice limoncello nightcap, we made our plans for the next day of sightseeing. We started the day with a guided tour of the Doge's Palace, as well as a visit to St. Mark's Cathedral. We met by a pile of what looked like stage risers. We later learned that they had been placed in the square in preparation for expected flooding, which was scheduled to occur only a week after we left. That's an important lesson. Check the flood schedules before you visit. The photos on the news looked like the people in Venice were having a pretty miserable time during the flooding. The Doge's Palace was the center of government in Venice. It housed the formal state areas, the courts, as well as the residence of the Doge, a leader who was elected for life by the aristocracy of Venice. The palace was meant to awe and impress. Each room was decorated to intimidate visitors and impress guests. It's a must-see when you go to Venice. Since the courts are located there, it's adjacent to the prison. Once someone is convicted of a crime, they're taken across the canal over what's called the Bridge of Sighs. Said to be called that because that's what the convicts do when they get their last look of Venice. The prison is decidedly less plush than the palace. After the Doge's Palace, we went next door to Basilica Cathedral of St. Mark. It's sometimes known as the Cathedral of Gold, since many of the mosaics use gold tiles. It's done in an Italian Byzantine style, but it shows a lot of damage from its frequent flooding. The floors are uneven and sunken, in places signaling that it's slowly crumbling. It's impressive, but quite crowded. After our guided tours, we decided to spend the afternoon wandering around the city to see the quaint shops, the alleys, on the way to the middle of the Grand Canal and the Rialto Bridge. During the day, Venice is crowded. The city is just beautiful, but it's hard to sightsee with so many people. The Grand Canal near the Rialto Bridge is gorgeous, but very crowded. The views from the bridge are truly a sight to behold. But don't feel like spending too much time there because the sightseeing away from the hordes feels less like being in an amusement park. As we wandered back to our hotel through the back streets, we decided to take a gondola ride. It's just something you have to do. They're about €80, and it takes you around a loop through some small side canals out to the Grand Canal before returning through other small canals to where you started. It does have the feel of a Disneyland ride, but we all ended up enjoying ourselves, so I don't know what that says about us. On our final day, we asked the concierge how we could best get to Murano to wander the island and see the glassworks. We were interested in buying some souvenirs. He suggested that we take the complimentary water taxi since we were all looking for something to buy. But he did not recommend walking Murano. He indicated it was just an industrial town and wasn't really meant for sightseeing. He did recommend taking a tour. We got the first class treatment and were taken to a single large glass factory known as Fornace Vernier. We were given a demonstration of how the glass artisans went about their work, and then were released in a huge showroom of incredible glass sculptures and other glass items. The items were undeniably beautiful. However, be aware that they aren't what we describe as factory direct inexpensive. Fortunately, the items were shipped back to the US, so we didn't have to carry the fragile items in our luggage. Be aware that items you buy there are subject to import taxes before you receive them, so what you pay at the factory isn't the final price you'll end up spending. After considerable shopping, we selected our trophies, paid our hefty bill, and asked for the water taxi back to Venice. Our handler suggested that they would give us a water taxi over to Burano, which is said to be a much better place for lunch, so we took them up on it. What we learned was that Burano was a charming little island and had a quaint old world feel that we thought Venice would feel like. It was far less crowded and consisted of vibrantly colorful homes, quaint shops, and nice little streets and canals over which we could wander. Of course, no water taxi ride is ever free, so we were obligated after lunch to visit the lace-making establishment Dalla Lydia. As I mentioned before, we weren't particularly interested in lace, so we went to look out of courtesy. It is a very labor-intensive and handcrafted item, which leads to a very high price. We wanted to have a memento from this charming town and felt a duty to buy at least some small token. So after deciding on something that was handmade by the 80-year-old seamstress, we ended up walking out with a placemat with small lace triangles in the corners that cost 380 euros. Yikes. Fortunately, Burano is a charming little city where you could wander and burn off lace buyer's remorse. We marveled at the beauty of Burano as we were taken back to Venice in our water taxi, licking our wounds from the expenses of the day. When we got back to Venice, we cleaned up and decided where we would enjoy our final dinner in Venice. After a lot of research, we picked Ristorante di Mario alla Fava, which was a short walk away from St. Mark's Square and located in a back alley partway to the Rialto Bridge. The place was outstanding. Seafood was fresh and prepared in the local style. Everything felt authentic and prepared to the highest standards. We had found our favorite restaurant in all of Venice. The following morning, we embarked on a water taxi right from the front door of our hotel, which took us to the Leonardo da Vinci Airport for our flight home. As your plane departs, remember to take a look out the windows as you climb out over the Dolomite mountain range. The granite escarpments are as impressive as any on Earth. In the end, we had really enjoyed visiting Venice. It's a city that's worth visiting for everyone. What disappointed us was how overcrowded and touristy it has become. What once might have been quaint stores lining the streets had now become large chains reminiscent of a high-end shopping mall. Many of the restaurants seem to have lost their local flavor. Just wandering around was best at night when the daytime visitors had left. We don't plan on going back anytime soon, but it sure wouldn't be disappointing if we ever did return. At least we know a really good restaurant to revisit. If you have any suggestions for visitors to Venice or places we should visit, please leave them in the comments below. If you like this content and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to the channel for future trips. Thanks again to our sponsor Wine Acuity, the app that lets you learn about wine while playing tasting games with your friends. See you next time!